Okay, so we will start by talking about whether or not the enabling objectives lead to the terminal objectives. And I believe that they do. For the most part, the first enabling objective says prepare for communication in real world situations by using common expressions. And it does relate to these terminal objectives because we can see that we are going to use that for maybe coherent stories or phrases in a sentence. However, the second enabling objective, it does not really relate to the terminal objectives, I feel, um, because talking about goals isn't really relating to idioms or expressions or forming them into a story. So I feel that I would change that into maybe collaborate with peers to discuss their morning routines, maybe day routines, using common idioms in order to form coherent sentences. Um, and also, I wanted to point out that this these objectives really do reflect a communicative aim in the classroom because as we can see, it's actually talking about communication, talking to peers. It's talking about forming sentences, forming stories. So I feel that it does have a communicative aim in the classroom. Um, for my rating for the objectives, I think I would give them a 3 in specific because everything is distinct, but there's not a great clear idea of what exactly the students will be doing to accomplish the goals. And for measurable, I would say that it's a 3 because they use they do use verbs, but they're not the best that they could use. And for clear, I would also say a 3 because I see that maybe students would ask for clarifications on what the teacher is trying to say in the objectives. Maybe ask her what idioms or expressions are if there's no knowledge of it. Um, and for related, I would say a 3 also because only one doesn't fit into the larger picture, but there is an order. We can see right here that there's enabling objectives and terminal objectives, so we can see an order of what's going on. And I think that's pretty much it for the objectives. Uh, for the scope and the sequence, I would say that because the first thing is, do the activities in this lesson clearly support or lead to the revised objectives? I feel that the lesson was pretty good at that. It talks about everything. It leads students to talk amongst themselves and also present. So I feel that it does. It also uses a lot of idioms and expressions, so it's teaching them that. So yeah. And the activities do naturally follow one another. I feel that the teacher starts off with teaching them what everything means, lets them gain an idea of what they think it means, and then leads on to them talking about it in a group, and then letting them present. So it's very structured. This lesson follows a PPP, which is presentation, practice, and production. I feel that the teacher presented first, and they practiced all together, and then the production was whenever the students were able to form a story together and present it. So they put in work for learning the material and discussing it. I would change the lesson plan only by assigning specific cards to students for their specific groups. Because if they get a card that doesn't go with the story, then they would have to form a sentence. Maybe that would take a little bit longer. So just in case it would take too long, I would just assign specific cards for the students and also form specific groups so that we aren't having trouble with that. And also, okay, that's pretty much it for what I have to say on the procedure. For the motivation, I would say that it's extrinsic motivation, because whenever the students are talking about like speaking out loud in front of the class, they are saying the part that they have, like the sentence that they have. So they are trying to have a good grade for themselves. They're trying to gain good feedback from the teacher, maybe from other peers. So I feel like that's extrinsic motivation. I also feel like students are just trying to learn a new form of language. They're just interested in that. Maybe it's intrinsic motivation in that way, because they're just trying to genuinely learn the language. I feel like this activity was included in this lesson because the teacher maybe doesn't want to give them some worksheets to work on, because they wouldn't process the information the same way. They wouldn't keep it in their minds, maybe. And I feel like by presenting this information that they learned that day, they would keep it and store it a little longer, maybe use it later. The students are learning how to talk to each other, how to be communicative, and just this will just generally help in real life situations. That's why I also feel like this activity is communicative, because they just interact with teachers, peers, also deeply think about what the material they just learned was and what it means to them. So they're reflecting. They also have to present this to the class, and it will push them to communicate in the best way that they can, their best ability, and it would also push them to communicate better outside of the classroom. Talking about the educational value, we can see that activity 1 makes students try and connect real life into what they're learning, gives them a realistic meaning to what they're learning, so they're thinking about what they do every day, where they hear these idioms or expressions. So yeah, I feel like it just gives them a more realistic sense of what they're learning. For activity 2, I feel that if done individually, it lets students feel like they have a control on what they're doing. It makes them feel like they have control on their decisions, which pushes them to perform better. When I learned about the self-control theory from Hunt, it said that whenever workers have a part of a stock in their company, they perform better. So yeah, moving on to activity 3, the educational value that I saw for this was by working with the work and having the freedom to ask the teacher for help. Students gain communicative skills, and they're encouraged to take ownership of the material that they're learning. So what I mean by working with work, which I messed up in that, by working with the group, they can have like a greater maybe communicative range. They can speak freely. They can just have more questions, feel more comfortable. For activity four, um, the teacher is not focused on the realistic sense of their stories, but more focused on how they put the sentences together, which helps students have more freedom, have more imagination when learning new material, maybe using a different type of language that they wouldn't use in everyday, which is good because it gives them a broader sense or greater sense of idioms and expressions. And sorry. So for the closure, the educational value that I saw was that it helps students try and communicate at their best ability in front of their peers and teacher whenever they're presenting. Whenever I'm presenting, I know that I try my best to use my best vocabulary, best communicating skills, and I think that's the educational value here. And for number two, in closing, um, the introducing the lesson for the next class lets students reflect on the day's learning or on what they will be learning next class. It will even probably let them investigate themselves on what the next lesson will be on, so they will come prepared to the class. And for three, assigning idiom story homework. The educational value here would be if students didn't understand what they learned in class, maybe the homework will help them think about the material at home and give them like more time to process the material and maybe search up what they have questions on uh, or find other materials that could help them. Maybe a book could help them. It will push them to have more ownership too on the material that they're learning. And that's pretty much it. I think it's a great lesson.